After months of rumors, supposed leaks, and awkwardly mocked up fake systems, we actually have what looks like the first real report on what might be going on with Nintendo's next piece of hardware. Something that could maybe be a Switch 2, and I'm actually a little more convinced it could be, or could be something entirely different. So let's go over what's being said here. Now, before we get into the specifics of what was being said in these reports, I do want to clarify why I put a bit more trust in these ones versus some of the rumors that we've heard over the past half a year or so. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's coming from multiple websites that have track records and reputations to uphold, and they are corroborating that they have similar sources saying the same thing. In particular, Video Game Chronicle was the first one to talk about this. Eurogamer later corroborated it. And so while it does still ultimately come down a little bit to, I know a guy who said a thing, there's just a little more reason to put a bit more faith into this versus a singular website reporting on it. That said, as we get closer and closer to this potential new system coming out, I'm going to cover any kind of reports that I put more faith in and what the system's actually going to end up being. So if you don't want to miss out on future videos like that, make sure to subscribe. Now, as for what these reports are actually claiming, there's basically four things that they are potentially confirming about this new hardware from Nintendo, along with a couple things that are actually kind of still hanging questions that they clarify are hanging questions, not things they can confirm one way or another. And those are actually the things that I find a little more interesting. Let's start off with what they're confirming first, though. First off, let's start with the things they are claiming is happening, though, beginning with a release window. Specifically, late 2024. It doesn't specify holiday, but if it's going to be in the second half of 2024, which does make a lot of sense. I mean, over the years, as we've talked about when Nintendo could target new hardware, a couple years back, I had hoped that late 23 was a possibility, but 24 was also very much likely to happen. I did hope it would also mimic the original Switch, where it came out earlier in the year, like in the March window, but that also does make sense because the context is different here. The original Switch was something they wanted to get out basically as soon as it was ready so they could have Breath of the Wild on it. They wanted to kind of start recouping and bouncing back from the Wii U. With right now, the Switch is performing well enough that they can target a more traditional holiday window to really try and get those initial sales going in the holiday season. Now, the next claim is that this would be a new handheld once again. However, compared to the most recent model of the Switch, it would not contain an OLED screen, but instead go back to being LCD, which is something that I'm a little bummed about, but it does make sense. Generally speaking, at least over the last decade, Nintendo has aimed at releasing systems that are on the more affordable end of the spectrum, and so if they are releasing new hardware where they are making a handheld that is beefing up performance more, adding stronger internals, investing more on those aspects of things, there's going to have to be some cost-saving measures put in at the same time, which relying on an LCD screen over OLED makes sense. Now, what this does make me curious about is if in the future, this becomes a new tactic for Nintendo as far as mid-cycle refreshes go. If this next handheld releases without an OLED option, potentially maybe mimicking the Switch, we could see an OLED option happen 2-3 years down the line as part of a mid-cycle refresh. I have also seen a few people hoping that maybe this is going to be a situation where Nintendo offers multiple models at launch, and so maybe, yes, the baseline one is LCD, but they'll offer a more expensive OLED one at release as well. Personally, I don't think that's something that Nintendo would do. Generally speaking, Nintendo has usually targeted having a mainline system option at release, and that is the main system you get. Maybe they offer a difference in terms of things like one option offers more internal storage, similar to what they did with the Wii U, and you got a couple extra little accessories with it. But they've never really done, at launch, two massively different model options offering different features and functionalities. So personally, if this report is accurate, I don't think there's a possibility of an alternate OLED model at launch. That is something that would definitely be down the line if Nintendo wanted to do one in the first place. Now, the last claim is interesting because it also ties a little bit into one of the hanging questions about this new hardware, and that has to do with the fact that this new system will continue to support physical media, which is a good thing. There has been a general movement lately from other manufacturers to try and move us towards more and more of an all-digital future, and Nintendo has always kind of lagged behind that a little bit. Their eShop options, for instance, were never quite as robust as what Xbox and PlayStation were offering, and while they do now have a lot better digital support going on, I'm glad they're still relying on a system that offers a physical media option. Now, the question with this is whether or not that media is going to be similar or different from what the Switch currently offers, because that also leads to the question of backwards compatibility. These reports have clarified that they do not know whether the system would be backwards compatible with the Switch or not, and the form the physical media takes would play a very large role in knowing that one way or the other, right? I think if Nintendo released a system that has a very clearly different kind of physical cart that is distinguishably different from the Switch, it's probably going to be a fresh start and something that doesn't support backwards compatibility. But if they do end up relying on physical media that reflects the same kind of style, that is either the exact same or at least very similar, so the reader could also support using physical Nintendo Nintendo Switch media, then backwards compatibility sounds like something that's more likely. Personally, and this probably is not a surprise to anyone, I hope backwards compatibility ends up being a priority for this next system, especially when it comes to a handheld. I really like the option of just having one device that plays as much of the library as possible. If they continue to release more games coming out on the Switch that cannot be played on this new hardware, I don't really want to be lugging around two different handhelds with me whenever I'm traveling. That said, there have been some past reports and claims before about Nintendo being interested in supporting backwards compatibility for their next systems. However, those same times have always come with the kind of thing of, we can't guarantee it is just something that we do think we want to do. I really hope that ends up happening with this system, but it is important to note that as of right now, we just don't know if the next system will be backwards compatible or not. And then the other hanging question, and is one that I think some people take for granted, but I've been very stubborn about, is whether or not this next system is a hybrid console. These reports do claim that the next system is a handheld, but cannot confirm whether or not it has a docking solution and is meant to be a hybrid system along the lines of the Switch. And that is something that I think is really interesting, because while I have been very stubborn about whether or not Nintendo's next hardware would be a Switch 2, where it's just another hybrid system that is more powerful, usually when I've made that argument, it's because I was convinced that if Nintendo didn't go that route, they would release a home console style system and continue to support the Switch as their hybrid, maybe slightly more handheld focused option, where older, lower spec games continue to release there, and then the home console would be for supporting newer, more powerful games, and maybe some other kind of new gimmick, because Nintendo systems love having some kind of gimmick. And so with that in mind, and this next system supposedly being handheld, I'm actually a little more inclined to believe that, yes, they are actually just going to go ahead and do a Switch 2. I still don't think it's guaranteed. It just makes more sense to me, though, that if they are going for a handheld option, it would continue the hybrid approach. Because as far as the tech goes, right, if you wanted to make a system that was pushing performance as much as possible, there are limitations that a handheld introduces that a home console style system wouldn't have to deal with. And so if you are doing a handheld system to begin with, I don't see much reason for it to not continue supporting that hybrid style solution, unless Nintendo has a particularly wild new different gimmick in mind for whatever this next system is. It's something that absolutely a lot of people want. It's something that makes a lot of sense given the current success of the Nintendo Switch. I've just always never taken for granted the fact that Nintendo can be extremely unpredictable, and at the end of the day, Nintendo does what it wants to do, for better or worse. Sometimes they have surprising new ideas that no one expected that ends up being a major success, like the Switch, and sometimes they experiment in a different direction and also pair that with poor marketing, and you get a situation like the Wii U. All that said, this new system being a handheld does make me think hybrid is actually much more of a possibility now. Not a guarantee yet, but I'm now much more willing to believe that it actually is a direct Switch successor than we had previously, assuming these reports are, again, accurate. All in all, the confirmations in here are relatively bare bones, but I think they really do give some interesting insights into what we might be seeing happen with Nintendo's next system, whether that is a Switch 2 or some kind of new handheld that is focused on a different kind of concept or idea. Like I said at the top end of this video, we've been seeing all kinds of weird rumors and leaks about what Nintendo might be doing next, a lot of them assuming a Switch 2, and these reports coming out today, at least to me, while being a little simpler in terms of what they're confirming, are much more believable, and I would say are very likely to end up being true. That said, again, Nintendo does what it wants to do. There's always the potential of these being outdated plans and things have changed, and we might end up getting something entirely different that's revealed down the line. I'm very curious to see how these stories continue to grow, because we're going to see a whole lot more bad fake rumors and leaks over the next year as we get ready for this next system, but there's going to be some good information here and there, and I'm very curious to see what ends up being true when the system does release, possibly at the end of the next year. So there's just some quick thoughts I wanted to spitball after reading these reports this morning about Nintendo's next hardware. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Do you guys think this stuff sounds accurate? Are you hoping it's wrong for certain reasons, whether because you want the next system to be OLED, you want for sure a hybrid system, maybe you want it sooner than holiday of 24? Just let me know down below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you guys later.